What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of the Struggle to Strength podcast, your source for real life application on how to turn your struggles into strengths in all things mind, muscle, and money. I am your host, Josh Levine, and I am joined here by my longtime friend and my co-host, Travis Hatch. And let's talk about this, y'all. The point of starting a business is to sell it and make money. But are you really prepared to sell it? Because most of us aren't. And I think Travis and I had our eyes opened in this episode while we were talking to our guest, Marvin, who's successfully exited numerous businesses and now teaches entrepreneurs how to successfully exit their own business to maximize their profits, which, spoiler alert, is the point of business. So the question is, would you like to make more money and would you like to reach a successful exit? If the answer is no to these, then you probably should not be an entrepreneur and maybe ask yourself a few questions about what you're doing. But in this episode, we talked to Marvin Storm, who has over 30 years in business, has had numerous exit strategies, and now is the host of a podcast where he interviews people who are looking to buy businesses. These are the people who are looking to acquire your business, and ask them about what they actually look for and tell stories about those acquisitions, the successful and the not so successful. And so in this episode, Marvin talks about a few key points. One, how to double the value of your business and start thinking about what type of buyer might be interested in your business. Are you looking for a replacement buyer, a management buyer, a financial buyer, or a strategic buyer? These are all very important things for you to know. And then additionally, what are the most common problems that entrepreneurs face? Plus, listen to the very end, and we'll give you a free worksheet to help you start thinking about your own exit, courtesy of Marvin. Now, before we get into it, of course, we ask that if you love this episode, please give us 5 stars on Apple or a follow on Spotify. Share us on your socials. You can find me at Josh Levine Fitness, Travis at Travis Hawks Media. Links are in the show notes. Now get ready to change the way that you think about your business, because Travis and I both have, and we continue to talk about it after the recording. We're going to bring you Marvin Storm. Tune in. We want to learn about your journey, obviously, into becoming an entrepreneur, but you've also found great success in selling businesses, on exit strategy, on identifying like what actually makes a valuable business. And so especially, kind of selfishly from Travis and I's perspective, like we are growing our businesses. We love the opportunity to be able to pick your brain, and our listeners love to be able to hear it as well. So getting into it, I think first what I would like to do is just learn a little bit more about you. Obviously, we know that, you've endured the coldest colds and you've now lived in beautiful sunny California. But tell us a little bit about yourself and, further a little bit more about what got you into business, how you got to where you are now as what I would call an expert on selling businesses acquisition.
Well, I started my career in college. I'll probably go back to the time I was in college.
I love it. Yeah.
I did like most college kids. I polished floors in the cafeteria, 2:30 in the morning, trying to pay for my college education, and worked in, convenience store, gas station clerk, type of thing. And worked in a game warden environment where I went out in early mornings and caught people poaching game and fishing, over their limit. But halfway through my college career, I got that entrepreneurial bug, and I actually started a few businesses, and one of them kind of took off on me. I started a maid service called Pop-In Maid Service, where I cleaned guys' apartments. So I had co-eds knocking on guys' doors, signing them up for, maid services. And they signed up a bunch of apartments. And before I knew it, I had, 50, 60 maids cleaning apartments, and, had cash coming in and bouncing checks that they would write me. And I had inventory and equipment and all the ills and headaches that a emerging startup has. And one of the things I had this huge cash flow issue, where I had money one week, and the next week, after paying everyone, I had no money. and it was a new experience for me. And so I took some accounting classes, and that sort of launched me on the career in accounting. I actually graduated in accounting and went to work for a national accounting firm, Deloitte at the time, and that's what took me to Chicago. And that whole experience really opened my eyes to how important, the whole financial side of a business is, and why a lot of, companies fail is they did just like I did as a struggling college student. Their business takes off on them and they're not prepared and they don't have the systems in place and things of that nature. And so it really kind of gelled my, philosophy on the importance of the financial side of the business. But after working in the accounting field, I played pickup basketball every Tuesday night for a couple of hours with a group of guys, and that went on for years. And I met a guy there who later became a co-founder. We just had a great time, liked each other. We're kind of the similar spot in our lives, and before you knew it, we're kibitzing and talking about business, and ended up submitting our resignations and launching our own business. We rented a 300 square foot office in downtown in a high rise, and got a couple of desks and some phones, and our desks faced each other, and we were in business, and did very well again, kind of in the right place at the right time, doing the right things. And the business did well. And we had a good run of about 8-9 years. And as often happens in business, the environment changes. His objectives and goals changed over time, as did mine. I wanted to go right. He wanted to go left. And we eventually decided the best thing for both of us was just to step away from the business and exit that business. And so that was the kind of first exit that I had. And from there, I launched several other businesses. And over a period of years, I acquired a national firm and was able to reposition that company, turn it around, and grow it substantially, and spin out another division of that company. And a few years ago, I stepped away from that company and sold it. Both companies, the one that I acquired and the one that I spun out. And it was a little bit different experience that I had with that company than I had had previously. Some of my other companies that I had sold were smaller in scale and sold to individuals. This was, when I acquired this last company, I brought in outside capital. Some of your audience may recognize the term private equity. And so I had an investor group into the company. And so I ended up, being an employee of the company and reporting to a board of directors and the investors. And that was a different experience. I now couldn't make decisions on the fly. I had to, get approval. I had to have budgets. I had to have goals, projections, business plans, and things of that nature. And it taught me a lot. And one of the things that I didn't really realize at the time, I understood it intellectually, that when you take other people's money as an investment into your company, a clock starts. Most companies or investment groups that make an investment into a company, they are looking for an internal rate of return. They want to make money on your efforts and time and expertise. And they generally, a private equity company group, has investment money, and they have general partners. And those general partners are very focused on meeting the objectives of the fund. And that objective is a certain time limit, a certain rate of return. And when they, execute at a high level and make good money for their investors, they can go out and raise more money and buy more companies. I sort of understood that, but when the reality hit, when I was sitting in that board meeting and they tell me, okay, it's time, we need to start planning an exit here, and we're going to sell the company, I wasn't ready. I was in the saddle. I was working hard every day. I had a great vision. Things were going well. We were expanding and growing. And my logic was, if we could just hang on for another couple of years, we could make a lot more money. Well, that's probably true, but that's not what our objectives are. It's not what we want to do. We want to, limit the time in this investment. We want to extract a return out of it, and we're going to sell and exit. And so what we did. And so after that experience, I kind of went from the fast lane over to the slow lane. And I found out very quickly, although I thought the slow lane was going to be nice and leisurely and a lot of fun and time to smell the roses and enjoy life, it was really kind of boring. After so many years of the pedal to the metal, and you're working hard and long hours. And as I went through and I thought about my career and kind of the times I've stepped away from different businesses and sold them, and I thought, if I'd have been a little bit more dialed in, if I would have been a little bit more prepared, I could have probably done better for myself, just because I would know what to expect and be prepared. And I thought, there's probably a lot of other people out there like myself, a lot of other entrepreneurs out there that could benefit from that type of insight. And so I thought, I love podcasts. I listen to them all the time. I don't know, 10, 15 hours a week. And podcasts I listen to still today. I listen to them, and because I just love gaining insights from other folks and other people in business. And I'm going to start a podcast. And so I took a little bit different tact as I thought through, what would probably be most beneficial for people like myself that haven't gone through selling their business before. Where could I add the most value to that? So I decided that probably what I would do, and what I did, is that I would interview not the actual entrepreneurs that had sold their business and getting their perspective, and that's very valid, but I would actually talk to the professionals that do this for a living. These are the M&A advisors, mergers and acquisition professionals, the investment bankers, wealth managers, CPAs, transaction attorneys, anyone that's involved in the transaction flow of facilitating an exit from a business, a sale, and have them share their stories. The good stories have turned out well, those home runs that were over the fence home runs, and why did that happen? How come they did so well? What are the takeaways? And then I would have them share the stories that didn't go so well, and why. How come they had the challenges and problems? Maybe the businesses didn't even sell. Why didn't they sell? And they also have shared some real tragic stories where, the entrepreneur dropped the ball on the last lap. That baton that was being passed, he just dropped it, just messed up the exit. And it created problems not only for himself and his family, not having the money he thought he was going to have from selling the business, but for the employees that had spent many years working for him, and the responsibility that goes along with that. And some really great takeaways. And I concluded, after listening and interviewing 100 of these folks and hundreds of stories, that there is a method to the madness. There is a process that, if you follow it, every business can have an optimal exit. You can really maximize the return you're going to get from your exit if you do some very basic blocking and tackling, and getting prepared for that eventuality when you will either pass your business on to someone within the company, an employee, a management group, a partner, a family member, whomever, or someone you don't know, someone that's outside of the company that's going to buy your company for, either an investment or to scale it or to grow it. The needs of those different groups are entirely different. How you get prepared to pass the baton on those type of exits is different. But it's not rocket science. Everyone can figure it out. But the problem most entrepreneurs make is they just don't get around to getting it all the business all teed up, where it's ready to go. And that's what I've found, where I can add a lot of value. And the podcast does that by sharing all these stories where people don't have to make those type of mistakes. They can learn from others.
Mm-hmm. I can understand how, as you're explaining this, I'm thinking as an entrepreneur myself, business owner, I kind of resonated with your story around the private equity situation that you found yourself in, where, you had built your baby. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with the concept of continuing to grow it and grow it and grow it. And when you're put into a position where it sounds like you weren't done, you wanted to continue to grow that business and grow that into something that was more successful, that you could get more money for. What's it like going through that? Because I can, like, right now, I'm still growing very quickly. I'm like, I'm not done yet. This is my baby. I'm like emotionally connected to it. So what was that like for you when you went through that situation?
Well, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. I wasn't ready. I think one of the faults that entrepreneurs have in their personality profile is that they're glass half full type of people. Mm-hmm. They can see opportunity in disaster. They can see opportunity in economic downturns. They're just optimistic, and they get into this frame of mind of thinking, and I'm like that. You get into this frame of mind of thinking is that there's always more that you can do. And just like I'll equate it to, kind of a phrase and an adage that everyone hears about, is that life is about timing. If you buy in the market, the stock market at the right time, and you sell at the right time, it's all about timing. If you buy real estate at the right time and you sell at the right time, it's all about that timing. And it really applies to a business too. And what entrepreneurs tend to do a lot of the time is just hang on too long. Because they're making a lot of money. They're going to the bank every week with a suitcase full of money, and they're making those deposits, and life is good, and they think it's going to last forever. And as anyone that's been in business knows, is that there are cycles. There is a life cycle to a business. You have that startup phase, and then you have the scaling phase, and then you get to maturity, and you kind of peak out, and competition comes in. There's a few years ago, there was a great book, written about the blue ocean strategy, where a blue ocean is where there are no other fish in the ocean, no sharks in the ocean, and it's just blue and everyone is doing well. And then all of a sudden, a lot of fish come into the water, and there's a lot of competition, and the sharks come in, and the water all of a sudden gets very bloody, and it becomes a red ocean, and no one is making money. And then you have to reinvent yourself. You have to find a new blue ocean. And, that kind of metaphor that is used is kind of the life cycle of a business. You get to maturity, and then sales gets competitive, and margins start to go down, and your business kind of tails off, and you have to kind of reinvent yourself. And I've gone through that a couple of times in my career. That first business I talked about, is that business came very easy for a long time until, things changed. And that's happened several times in my career, and almost any entrepreneur will go through that evolutionary process of kind of repositioning the business as competition comes. But the mistake that most entrepreneurs make is they just hang on too long. There is a right time to sell a business. And if you give that some thought and you position your business properly, you can do extraordinarily well if you time the exit. And it's just like anything else. If you time when you're selling something for the optimal profit, you'll do well. But the mistake that entrepreneurs make, because they're eternal optimistic, they just think tomorrow is going to be a better day. And life's going to go on forever. And unfortunately, it doesn't.
And the goal is to make money. So obviously, especially if you have a business that can have an exit strategy, I think maybe not all businesses can have a very successful exit strategy, or some are set up better than others. But it's part of the ideal life cycle that we'd like to go through. Now, you've been through this several times yourself, and I would love to learn more about the how to identify the proper timing. But before we go into that, I'm curious, the talk about the blue and red oceans. How many times have you personally gone through that cycle? How many times have you built and exited on the numerous businesses that you've had, and how many would you call successful?
Well, I've had 4 exits in my career. 3 of those were, what I would consider successful, and 1 wasn't. And the process of going through that, what I've learned, along the path of entrepreneurship, you learn, is that entrepreneurs become pretty successful at what they do. A good entrepreneur learns, and they do their craft, the product they built, the services they offer, they become really good at it. And their energy that they get, and the joy and the excitement they get from sailing their own ship, comes from that problem-solving environment. It comes from facing challenges on a day-to-day basis. That's why they get out of bed in the morning. They get energized by that process. And because they are problem solvers, and because they become really good at what they do, become kind of the expert in their specific niche, they take on the attitude and the philosophy that, when it comes time to sell my business, I'll just figure it out. It's what I've done my whole career. That's how I've built my business. That's how I've been successful, is by figuring things out. And I get it. I've had that attitude myself. But what the data actually shows, there have been studies of, the whole process of selling businesses, and how many get sold successfully, and those that don't, and why they don't. The data doesn't support that philosophy of being able to figure it out when the time comes. Years ago, I was in kind of a roundtable, discussion, kind of what you would call today as a mastermind, where you have a bunch of people that get together and they share ideas and thoughts and experiences. And there was kind of the old crusty guy in the room, had a lot of gray hair, a lot more than I have now. And he's what you would call, at the time, an experienced, seasoned entrepreneur. And he said, you don't have to worry about, preparing, planning an exit. If you run a good business, the exit will take care of itself. And I thought, well, that makes sense. I'll just focus on running my business, and I won't worry about an exit. Unfortunately, the data, as I said, doesn't support that. Because when it comes time to exit, the type of things you're trying to figure out are things that you've never done before. And so this whole premise and thesis of you being really good at what you do doesn't translate necessarily over to executing a great exit, because you've never done it before. Or if you have, you haven't done it enough to become an expert at it. And so that's where the problems really, kind of emerge and create issues, where you either don't optimize your exit or you completely drop the baton. And that's what, of all the stories, or many of the stories on my podcast highlight that fact, is that people are unprepared when it comes to exit, even though they think they're going to figure it out. And those that actually go through a thoughtful process of positioning their business and making it appealing for a certain type of buyer that they think may be interested in their business down the road, tend to have a multiple factor higher of an exit than those that don't, and kind of wait for the magic to happen. Sometimes it doesn't happen.
It makes a lot of sense. And, especially the fact, we're all bad at stuff the first time. Our first podcast was terrible. The first thing of anything you do is going to be pretty rough. So having trusted guidance is, of course, massively valuable. Now, when we're talking about the most important part leading up to the exit is to make your business appealing. Nobody wants to buy an unappealing business that doesn't have a lot of value or money. And something that you talk about is doubling the value of your business, which of course makes it more appealing. I can only imagine. What else can make your business appealing? And then I'd really like to learn your thoughts on how we can double the value of our business.
Well, it's a process. Just like almost anything in business, there are steps that if you execute them properly, you increase the probability that future events will have a better outcome than winging it at the time and shooting from the hip. But some of the things you can do, I've often asked entrepreneurs, would you pay what you're going to be asking for your business, knowing what you know about your business? Would you actually write a check for what you're going to be asking for your business, given the condition that it's in right now? And you get that shuffling of the feet or looking down at the desk, and they say, well, I don't know if I would or not, and so I say, well, you don't really need to put yourself in the frame of mind and walk around to the other side of the table where the buyer is going to be sitting and look at your business as a buyer would look at it. What are they going to be interested in? What are they going to want to see? And then provide it for them and tee up the things that they're going to want to need and understand about your business, and provide it to them in a very easy and understandable way, and sometimes voluminous way where you have a lot of information about certain components of your business. And if you do that, you will increase the probability of a great exit. But unfortunately, that is rarely done. There are different types of buyers for your business. And so one of the things that you need to do is really start thinking about years in advance, what type of buyer is going to be interested in my business. And so there are different buckets of buyers. One bucket for certain types of businesses is kind of the replacement buyer. This is a buyer that is going to step in the shoes of an entrepreneur. They're going to do the same thing that the entrepreneur that owns the business, the founder of the business, does on a day-to-day business, because that entrepreneur is kind of the focal point of the business. Nothing happens unless he's there. That means he has a difficult time taking a vacation because he's the engine behind the business. He handles all the sales. He handles the customer service. He's the the subject matter expert, that he hasn't taken the time to replace himself in the business. So if that type of business is the business that's going to be sold, then you're looking for that type of buyer. And so the universe or the pool of those type of buyers out there is relatively a small bucket. And so the probability of you finding the ideal buyer is greatly reduced. Then you move up a notch into, kind of the management buyer, the one that wants to step into a business because there's already someone that can take care of the operations of the business, and the buyer coming in can let that person manage the business on a day-to-day basis. and focus on growing the business. Maybe it's in sales, maybe it's developing products and services or something, but he can focus on the growth engine of the business. And so that bucket is a lot bigger. That bucket may have twice as many buyers who want to fill that role. And then you have really the financial buyer. And these are the private equity type of companies out there that look at your business. The entrepreneur may or may not be really crucial to the operation of the business, but there is a management team in place, and the business has systems and processes, and they would want to invest in that business because of the financial metrics of the business. You're making good money, the margins are great, you're growing at a specific rate. That's appealing to that type of buyer. And that bucket is even bigger, okay? And then you have kind of the best buyer out there, if you can position your business to be of interest to a strategic buyer, someone that looks at your business and how well it might fit into their company, into what they're doing. They may have 10,000 customers that they're servicing, and you have a product or service that fits the needs of their customer base that they don't have. And so your business is of interest to them because of its strategic nature, of how they're going to be able to plug your business into their existing customer base. And they will pay up a lot for putting your company into their portfolio of products and services. And I have a lot of stories on the podcast about how companies have been able to pull that off and attract the interest of several strategic buyers that were interested in a business, and where one buyer, who's kind of the industry leader, knows that there's another company bidding on this business that's a competitor. And they certainly don't want the competitor to get your product or service. And so you create kind of an auction type of environment where 2 or 3 companies are bidding for your business because of how well it fits into their business. And there are situations where traditional valuation goes out the window. People open up their checkbook and they write a check just to block their competitor from getting your company, because it would be so detrimental to their strategic positioning to lose that acquisition. And that's where an entrepreneur. And so you have these different type of buyers that come to the table. And if you can, in advance, think about your company, what you have to offer, and how you're kind of managing your company. And if you're the first type of buyer we talked about, that you're kind of the focal point of the business, well, you may not want to be there, because you may get 2 or 3x of your earnings in that type of environment. Where on a strategic acquisition, you may get 10x of what your company is worth on a financial basis. And so you need to decide kind of what type of buyer you want to appeal to, and years in advance start moving toward that goal. And that's how you are able to optimize, double, triple the amount of money that you can put in your pocket at the end of the road, is to think about who that buyer is going to be.
That makes a lot of sense. And I'm thinking back to before I did go off my own, start my own businesses. I did work for a tech startup. And in fact, I think we even were in communication with Deloitte, who you mentioned you used to work for. And they were interested in potentially buying us. And they were buying our software in order to, what I believe was, use in-house, because we had like a cultural engagement software to help improve the hire selection for new hires. And it seemed to work really well. But it seemed strategic to me. Now, it fell through, and there were a couple other things that we ran into that was my first my first experience with, like, man, we run a good business, but the acquisition part is hard. Like the exit is challenging. And we ran into a couple, 2, 3, I think, kind of roadblocks like that. And so it was my first look into some of the problems that entrepreneurs would face during their exit. And, it would get all the way down to, a letter of intent, and all of a sudden it would fall through. So what are some common problems that entrepreneurs typically face, whether or not they're specific to the exit? But as we're thinking ahead, I'm trying to think now, like, okay, for my businesses, how can I position them? What type of buyer do I want to attract? What are some common problems that people face that we can begin to think about how to work around?
Well, that is there are hundreds of problems, but
welcome to entrepreneurship, right?
That's right. But the biggies out there that entrepreneurs really don't take into consideration because they haven't been down this road and they don't really think about what the buyer is going to be concerned about. I'll give you a couple of examples. When you are looking to exit a business and you know that the buyer that comes to the table, most buyers will not write a check for the total amount. They're going to finance the acquisition somehow. It may be financed with equity, it may be financed with stock, it may be financed with debt. And if it's going to be financed with debt, then you really have two buyers at the table. You have the company that's acquiring it, and you have their banker. And the banker is only interested on how that company is going to pay back the loan. They could care a lot about the strategic nature of it and a lot of those things. They just want to know if they're going to get repaid and what the probability is. And so they look at different things and components of the business. And one of the things they look at is, where does the money coming from? Where is the revenue coming from? And so you have companies that build their whole product and service on a customer that they deal with relatively infrequently. Take a moving and storage company, for example. That is an easily understood example where someone decides they're going to sell their home and move, and they may be leaving the area. They may be moving from California to New Hampshire, okay? And so the moving company in California is going to see that customer once. And so the revenue profile of that type of company is an infrequent user, not a repeat customer very often. And so the revenue profile, the banker will value that type of revenue differently than, let's say, a company that has repeat customers. It's a consumable, so they come back every 6 months to buy some more of the product or services. They may be on a long-term contract. The example that I've used where a company in the heating and air conditioning field dealt with customers that they always called. When it got hot, they called about their air conditioners not working right. And when it got cold, they called when their heating systems weren't performing optimally. And that created this peaks and valley of the revenue. And that is, you can't maximize revenue because you don't have enough technicians and things to be able to go out to service it. So you're telling people, we'll call you when we have time type of thing, And so the customer's calling around to a bunch of different companies. And so you have a company that says, okay, I'm going to offer maintenance contracts to my best customers. And so they get to be at the front of the line. And so we will come out 2 or 3 times a year. We will do maintenance on your air conditioning. We'll do maintenance on your heating system. And we'll come out to evaluate your system if there's any repairs that need to be made so that you don't have these emergencies. We'll do that. And if in case you do have an emergency, we come see you first. Well, if you're a company that depends on customers coming into your store and you're in Arizona and it's really hot, you want to make sure your customers have air conditioning. And so you get put at the front of the line. But because they sign a maintenance contract, that revenue is predictable. It's renewal. People sign up every year for that revenue. And so the profile of the revenue is different from the one-off, you only see them once, to customers writing a check every year. So on their credit card, they get re-upped every year. That's very predictable. And you may have a renewal rate in the 80, 90, 95 percentile. Well, when a banker or a buyer looks at that, well, there's less risk. And so they're willing to pay more as a multiple of profits based on your revenue profile. And I mentioned that is because a lot of entrepreneurs don't think about the type of revenue they got. They just focus on how fast the revenue is growing. But a buyer is going to be interested in the profile of that revenue, and they're going to be willing to pay more for that. And so if you in advance can think about positioning your company so it has a bigger proportion of renewal type of revenue, subscription revenue, something like that, that will position you to be more attractive, and deals will be easier to finance. And if deals are easier to finance, they get done better and quicker, and a higher multiple is paid for those. Another common issue is you don't understand, or sellers don't understand how important the financial component of the business is, and the deep dive that a buyer is going to go to verify your revenue. They're just not going to accept that you have tax returns that you filed and that you have financial statements that you have. They're going to want to know what's behind that. And a lot of situations, deals fall apart at the last minute because the buyer is unable to provide the detail and the in-depth information that a buyer is looking for. And deals fall apart because buyers just can't provide that, because their systems aren't set up to easily extract that type of information.
Mm-hmm. When you're saying that, I'm thinking of like the people on Shark Tank and shows like that don't really know their numbers, or they know just the surface level of the numbers and then they choke. And when you're sitting there, you're like, how do you not know these numbers? And then as a business owner, you're like, there's so many numbers. It's like, how do I know them all?
Well, I watch Shark Tank all the time, and Mr. Wonderful on Shark Tank, he's always wanting to know what the business acquisition cost is. He wants to know that number. And if you can't tell him that number, he knows that you're not on top of your numbers, and that spells risk. And risk translates into how much they're willing to invest or pay for your business. Higher risk, lower valuation.
Now, and while we're on the topic, like what are like some numbers that every business owner should know off the top of their head at all times?
Their customer acquisition costs, the margins on different product lines that they have, what their after tax and what their EBITDA, their earnings before interest, taxes, and amortization are. They should be able to quote those at will. And if they can't, it doesn't mean that they have a bad business. It doesn't mean that they're not running a profitable business. It means that when things go sideways, they don't know it until it's too late.
Yep, that makes sense. And I think, as I've grown and developed my own business, I know those are numbers that I've started to pay more attention to, as I even learned how to track those things, as I even learned how to identify how much it costs me to obtain a new client. How many conversations do I need to have? How much time does it have to have those conversations? Who's having them? The phone calls, like all of those things kind of come together, and it's constantly changing. Now, do you, this might be a weird question, do you have any apps, or is this all done on Excel? I know you have a history of accounting. Are there easy either apps or softwares or something of that nature, maybe like a QuickBooks or something, that makes it a lot easier for people to start paying attention to those numbers?
Well, sure. I don't think it's so much about the actual applications that you're using. It's that you have to figure out what the financial performance metrics are to your business and what is critical to your business. And regardless of the system you use, to be able to extract that information easily, and that you have that information in real time, because we live in a world today that is highly competitive, that the power, when I got started in business, you had these antiquated computers that, filled up a small room, and now you carry it around in your pocket. And, so the ability to use big data to extract data out, crunch it and analyze it because of the computing power, and then spit out key metrics. You just need to know what you need to have spit out and what you need to monitor and track. Because if those numbers go sideways, and take the acquisition of cost of a customer, that can absolutely crater a business overnight if that acquisition cost goes sideways. And when if you're a consumer-oriented business and you're using platforms like Facebook or some online platform that is generating leads and customers for you, and they change their algorithms, and because they change their algorithms, all of a sudden, your customer lead count is going down and the cost is going up, and you just don't know that at the time, you can burn through tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in the blink of an eye because of the lack of information. You're just not aware of it until a week or two down the line, when all of a sudden the bank deposits are going down and you're surprised. And the point is, you shouldn't be surprised. You should have the canary in the coal mine that is tweeting away because it can't get enough oxygen because the environment has changed. And you need to have that type of intelligence and insight into your business. And I don't care what systems you're using necessarily. It's just that you need to know what those indicators are. And when something changes, a red flag goes up and says, look at me, look at me.
Yep. I think the biggest thing for me is because I'm not the most technologically gifted person. I'm not great at Excel. I hire that out. So my assistant sends me every week. She sends me a list of all my KPIs, everything I ask her for. I don't know how she does it. I just tell her this is what I need, and she makes it happen. So thank God for her. But you're right.
So you're smart. Amazingly, not a lot of people do that.
Oh God, I hate that stuff.
Well, not a lot of people hire those type of people to give you that type of information. They just make assumptions along the way. It's amazing. It's amazing. I've dealt with, and stories are abundant on the podcast of entrepreneurs that have been very successful because they happen to be in a expanding market where the cash flow covers up a lot of ills because they're expanding until something changes. And especially when they're getting ready to exit their business and they're called upon to give the type of information that a buyer is going to want to see, those metrics that your assistant is providing, that you compile those over a period of time so you can show a historical backdrop to those metrics and how stable they are and how they've grown over time. And the buyer will then extrapolate on what the future is going to look like and project the type of cash flow so that his banker will lend on that cash flow and be able to write you a check for the business. It all sort of ties together. And being able to just look at those numbers every week or at least in a somewhat consistent manner. I mean, even if you don't own a business, you can think about this as trying to grow your Instagram profile. There's the insights button. You can see how many people you reached on certain posts this week versus last week. Maybe what posts work well and what don't. And if you notice that those numbers start to tank, just like they would in your business, then you're right. That's a red flag. But man, I'll tell you, I went for a long time without knowing what any of those numbers were. And I was just flying by the seat of my pants. And I feel much more in control now. And I can much more accurately sort of anticipate an outcome that I'm working towards. Now we're coming up on an hour here, and so we usually like to keep it around there. But a last question that I had to kind of wrap things up and bring everything that we've talked about together towards the end of the show right now is the final big question is, if you could offer one piece of advice to entrepreneurs listening in, and honestly, even just Travis and I, because that's part of what we're doing is picking people's brains who know more than us. If there was one piece of advice you could offer to listeners of this podcast about business exits, what would it be? Well, I use a metaphor, and I'm actually writing a book based on this metaphor. is that a pilot doesn't pack his parachute when the engines are on fire. The parachute is packed. If he needs it, he's going to be able to grab that parachute and head for the exit. Unfortunately, in the world that we exist today, things change very quickly. And those business owners, entrepreneurs, founders out there that don't have their parachute packed when in relation to their planning of some time an eventual exit, because there's only certain things that can happen to your business. You're either going to live forever, which is not likely. You're going to pass it on to someone within the company, someone you know, or a third party that you don't know, or you're going to go out of business and go bankrupt. Those are your choices. So if those are the choices, then you probably should, a smart person should probably decide which one of those it's going to be, and then pack your parachute and get ready for that exit, because it is going to happen. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And if you can time your exit, you're going to be going up that slope of growing and scaling your business. You don't want to be at the top where it's getting ready to go down, where it's getting very competitive. You want to exit when you have a lot of growth and runway ahead of you, so your buyer can say, this is a great business. You've had a great track record. I see a lot of opportunity and potential. You're still growing. That's when you want to exit. And you can do that if your parachute is packed and you're ready to go, and have all the things that a buyer is going to want to see you have ready. In case you have a bad health diagnosis, something happens in your business, your key person leave, and you decide you need to exit, then you're ready because that parachute's packed. So that's my big takeaway for today, I guess.
I love that. And that's it's something I've heard Travis talk about quite a bit, is, at the end of every peak comes a valley. And yeah, if you sell at the peak, you're essentially giving someone a valley. That's not very desirable. So be ready, stay ready. I really like that. And that kind of goes for a lot more than just business acquisitions. Don't have to get ready if you stay ready.
All right. That's absolutely true.
Yeah. Well, I got to say, I have definitely learned a lot, and you've changed my way of thinking on a couple things here. And I'm going to start thinking a little bit more critically and long-term, and identify who might be interested in the businesses that I continue to grow. So this has been really beneficial for me. I really appreciate you spending the time to chat with us. I know that I and Travis and a lot of our listeners are probably going to want to learn a little bit more about you, follow you, listen to your podcast. So I'd love to give you the opportunity to just give yourself the plug, tell us where we can find you, what your podcast is, and see how we can
that's
support
great. You. Well, I really appreciate saying that. It's very gratifying to me to have someone say, well, I'm going to start thinking differently now. I actually understand what you're talking about, and I'm changing my thought process a little bit here. That's very gratifying for me, because it means a lot, because some people spend decades building something and they just aren't able to get across the finish line because they don't change their thinking. So well, thank you for saying that. I think the best place for anyone to start, quite frankly, is to listen to the podcast. It's built on 4 transactional stories. Every episode talks about 2 transactions that went well, 2 transactions that didn't, and what the takeaways are. And if you listen to these over a period of time, you're going to learn a lot about the type of things you should be doing and the type of things you shouldn't be doing. I've also prepared kind of a report to get people kind of thinking conceptually about what exit strategies are all about. And you just go to businessexitstories.com/report. Number 2, that's report with numeral 2. And you can download this report, and it's 10-15 pages long. It's PDF format. It's an easy read, and it'll kind of give you kind of a big picture overview of the things you need to start thinking about to optimize that value.
I love that. And I appreciate you giving that to the listeners, because I think it's always great when we can provide everyone with a simple takeaway of some things that we've learned throughout the episode. And I also want to note, for those who may have forgotten, that that Marvin's podcast is the transactional stories that we're talking about are from the perspective of the buyers, right? Not necessarily the sellers. So this isn't sellers that are telling their stories about acquisitions that went good or bad. This is actually what the buyers want to see. And from the buyer's
they're actual
perspective,
transactions. These are actual deals that either did well or didn't do well.
yeah,
These are real stories. So,
and I think that's really valuable to get that perspective. And I love that you decided to take that route with the podcast. So I'm for sure going to tune in, and we'll also grab this report so I have a nice, clear report of what we've talked about today. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge with the listeners and with us, man. It's been very eye-opening. So I know we will continue to be in touch, and
that'd be great.
Yeah. Again, thank you for coming on. Thank you to everybody who's tuned in for another episode of the Struggle to Strength podcast. We will see you guys next week.